Watch this vidcast, or I'll gouge your eyes out.
Welcome back, horror hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. We're going to get started with
Horror Show News.
Fede Alvarez to produce new Texas Chainsaw Massacre film.
Ari Aster's director's cut of Midsommar gets a UK Blu-ray release on October 28th.
Sid Haig making speedy recovery after accident.
Lost George A. Romero film The Amusement Park is premiering in October.
American Horror Story 1984 premieres on FX.
And It Chapter 2 is on track to earn the franchise a global box office tally of $1 billion.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
So Fede Alvarez is going to be producing the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's not going to be directing. He's actually looking for a director. And from what I understand, they're hoping it's going to function as a direct sequel to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, much in the same way that the 2018 Blumhouse Halloween functioned as a direct sequel to the original Halloween. Alvarez is actually producing for Kim Henkel, who's the co-writer of the original and did the 1994 one, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, and it will be done for Legendary Pictures. I can only hope for the best with this one.
It is promising that Kim Henkel's involved, but he also did Next Generation. So even though I like it, it's not a great movie.
I like Matthew McConaughey in it. It's just, I don't think there's been like a really good Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie since the second one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're just beating a dead horse, because that's a long time ago to just still trying to do this. What it came out, 1986.
Yeah.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out. That was 33 years ago, and I feel like ever since then, they've been trying and trying and trying, and nothing quite works. So hopefully they get it right this time, but I'm not particularly looking forward to what it is. Well, I like Fede Alvarez. I think he's a good director. I might be a little bit more interested if he were directing, but he's just producing. So I'm going to have to wait to hear a little bit more of the talent involved, who's going to be writing it, the stars. So we'll see how this one goes.
The second one was a departure from the original. I mean, in a good way, but it was still a departure. So I wish they would continue it from part two, but
that might be too odd, because the tones, as it is, the tone of part one and part two don't match, even though they're both good films on their own.
Yeah.
If you're trying to be faithful to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the only option or route I see is to do what everybody's been doing, is ignoring the entire franchise except the first one.
Yeah, and part two is one that you can watch on its own.
Yeah, it exists independently of the rest of the franchise.
Yeah, it exists under its own merits.
You're listening to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
So Ari Aster's director's cut of Midsommar gets a UK Blu-ray release. This comes out October 28th, and I would normally get excited about it, but if you pay attention to the UK Blu-ray release, that means you cannot play it in the US.
So if you live in the UK, it's good for you. It's actually okay for me, because I have a region-free Blu-ray player. They cost $150, folks. They're worth the investment in the long run, because you'll be able to watch all the obscure cult and horror movies, or any kind of movies that you can't get in the US. It's probably available on some other part of the world. Region free opens you up and kind of frees up your option. So I'm actually looking forward to it, because I'll be purchasing the UK import. I'll be buying it, so don't worry, Michael. I'll bring over the region free so we can check out the director's cut.
Nice.
But yes,
everybody doesn't have it, but like you said, it's not that expensive.
I think it's a worthy investment, because there's a lot of good films that I've been able to purchase and see in HD.
Yeah.
Because of having a region free. But mind you, they cost $150, whereas most Blu-ray players nowadays cost $40, $50.
So you'd really have to have an appreciation for foreign films to make an investment like that.
Not necessarily, though, because a lot of great American films are only available on the foreign market, especially a lot of like more cult horror or art house movies.
It does happen like that.
American audiences don't appreciate, might be more appreciated in France or the UK or somewhere. To make the investment worth it, you're either into foreign films or obscure cult and horror movies.
Even Lost Highway only had a
German release until recently.
Yeah.
Which David Lynch does not approve of, though.
Yeah, I still want to see it, though.
I imagine it's still going to be really good.
That whole exchange with David Lynch, that doesn't sound like him, does it?
No, I guess he wasn't involved in it. They tried to get him involved. He wouldn't do it, so they just went forward.
Yeah.
But it is done by Kino Lorber, and they put a lot into their restorations. So even though Lynch isn't involved, I imagine it's still probably a quality restoration of that film.
Shut up.
So Sid Haig is making a speedy recovery after a recent accident. We would have reported on this last week, but we didn't have any news. We didn't do the news last week. We just did our interview with Hart Fisher. This is what Susie Haig, Sid Haig's wife, posted to Instagram. Hello everyone. I know it's taken a while, but here's the quick and dirty. Sid took a nasty spill early last week and went to the ER to make sure everything was okay. It was, but they kept him for a bit of observation. Late last Thursday night, he vomited in his sleep. Because he was asleep, the vomit went into his lungs, which is aspiration. Fortunately, since they were monitoring him, the alarm went off and they were able to get the vomit out in an air tube with suction in. They suctioned his lungs for a couple days and everything came out, so they were able to remove the air tube suction. He's been breathing well for several days now, but they still have to monitor for infection to be safe, since the bacteria in the human gut can set up an infection in the lungs when this happens, and are giving him IV antibiotics to protect him. His color is great, nice and pink, and his vitals are excellent. So while he's not allowed to eat or drink fully just yet, they started letting him have a tiny bit of juice and water. She also said, he kept asking me to give him the full cup of juice and got quite cranky when I said I couldn't yet, so that's a huge improvement. Sid's being hungry and thirsty, plus Sid being cranky and fighty equals Sid getting better. Today went great and he's continuing to improve. So, thank you all for your prayers and caring and kindness, and thank you to Chop Top Bill Mosley for his supportive posts. They are most appreciated by all of us here at Camp Haig. Love and gratitude and a whole lot of respect for you. Thank you for sending your energy to my sweet baby. Love really does conquer all. And she also said he's recovering like a champ. So this is really good news. I was actually pretty worried about what was going to happen because I know Sid Haig is getting older, and I've noticed over the past few years he's lost a lot of weight and his age is starting to show more rapidly than it used to.
Yeah.
And it was the reason that Sid Haig has a reduced role in the new From Hell, the Rob Zombie movie, as Captain Spaulding, which Mike and I saw and we both enjoyed, but we'll discuss that later. So he has a reduced role in that because of that. I think Rob Zombie was going to wrote the film with Captain Spaulding and Sid Haig in mind.
Yeah.
Then he found out he was sick, so he had to reduce the role to make it less strenuous. Then he went to see him, he realized even that was going to be too much for him to perform. So they had to make it a very small role that guaranteed no strain on Sid Haig. But I'm glad to see he's recovering. I want to see him in more movies. I don't think this is Sid Haig's time to go yet. Yeah,
so in 3 was From Hell, his part was kind of reduced to just one mostly dialogue scene. And it was part of the
documentary
whole
montage
at the beginning, yeah.
So,
but I completely get why he wasn't able to be such a big part of it, and we have noticed a decline in his health over the past few years, because when we did that interview with him, and then we listened to an interview with him just a couple years later, and his voice was already sounding
noticeably
more frail and
noticeably more frail.
Yeah, but he still had that fire in him that makes him Sid Haig, you know.
I have a feeling we're gonna have Sid Haig we're gonna have him around for a while.
Yeah.
So we send best wishes out to Sid Haig and Susie Haig. We're rooting for you.
Get well soon, Sid. So a bit of good news, something we've been hearing about for a while, but it's finally going to happen. Lost George A. Romero horror film, their amusement park, is premiering in October, and I think we've reported on this before, but it was still kind of rumors.
We reported it on the podcast last year when his wife just announced that it was going to be released, but at the time I don't think there was any specified release date.
So last year, as we said, Romero's wife, Suzanne Disrocher Romero, announced a 1-hour unseen George Romero film will finally be released to the public. It's a made-for-TV horror film from 1973 that was meant to double as a PSA on age discrimination. The restoration was crowdfunded. The George A. Romero Foundation posted this to their Twitter account. The George A. Romero Foundation is thrilled to announce that George's lost film, The Amusement Park, will be making its official premiere on Saturday, October 12th at Pittsburgh's Regent Square Theater. Thank you to everyone who contributed and made this screening possible. The premise of this film is an elderly gentleman sets out for what he thinks will be a normal day at an amusement park and is soon embroiled in a waking nightmare, the likes of which you've never seen.
I am so fucking stoked to this. How often do you get a horror master like George A. Romero, a film released from the era when he was in his prime, when he was at the top of his game, to the public like that? That's a really, for me, it's a really big event in the horror community to get not just a new George Romero film, but a new George Romero film from the height of his powers. And I'm really looking forward to it. The age discrimination aspect seems really interesting. George Romero was always good by marrying social commentary to a lot of his horror. So that seems like a natural progression from something like Night of the Living Dead. So 1 hour.
Yeah. It doesn't dampen my excitement that it's a TV movie either. That's probably why it's an hour. With Romero, I'm sure he can make an excellent movie without a lot of gore. I don't think his movies have had a lot of great gore in them. But that's not the only thing that makes them great. I don't think they actually needed it. It wasn't a crutch. It was actually used as just a part of the narrative.
And I think it's fitting that it's going to be making its premiere in Pittsburgh, considering that's where Romero's career got started with Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously that's the natural choice of where to premiere it. I hope we get to see it soon. I'm sure it'll be rolled out somehow or we'll be able to access it some way. But it's something that I'm going to be really excited for when we finally see. And we'll probably count it as a 2019 horror film so we can include it in our discussions of our favorite horror films of 2019, hopefully.
Yeah, vintage George Romero that we've never seen. That's exciting.
In 2019.
It's like we're watching Dawn of the Dead for the first time. Well, not quite, but...
Yeah.
Shut up.
So, American Horror Story 1984 premiered on FX on Wednesday night. It's gotten really good reviews so far. Everything I've heard, we'll probably be talking about it in one of our upcoming podcasts after a few episodes have aired. It's going to be kind of weird because Sarah Paulson's not in it, Evan Peters isn't in it, and obviously Jessica Lange isn't. She hasn't been in it for a very long time.
And I hear she's never going to be in it again.
Emma Roberts is actually the star this time around, and if you've seen the show, you've noticed that she always plays these really catty, bitchy characters that are really unlikable. And from what I understand, she's actually playing the protagonist this time and is a likable character. So that's probably a good change of pace. And she's going to be stepping up into a lead role. She usually has supporting roles, or she'll only be in for a few episodes before her character is killed off. We also have cast members like Billy Lord as Montana Duke, Leslie Grossman as Margaret Booth, Cody Fern as Xavier Plimpton. These are interesting names. Matthew Morrison as Trevor Kirshner. Gus Kentworthy as Chet Clancy. John Carroll Lynch, the great John Carroll Lynch, who played the possible Zodiac in Zodiac, will be playing Mr. Jingles. Angela Ross will be Rita. And Zach Villa will be playing Richard Ramirez. This is a complete tribute to the 80s slasher movie era films. I read you get a sense of Halloween, Friday the 13th. And it's going to be interesting because, like most seasons of American Horror Story, they always incorporate elements of real life into their narratives. And it'll be interesting to see Richard Ramirez in the context of a 80s slasher movie.
Yeah.
I wonder what that's going to add to it.
And it has a lot of familiar faces in the series in there, but not the main familiar faces you're used to, like Sarah Paulson and Evan Peters.
Don't you think that might be a little appropriate, considering that this is more of a B-movie season of American Horror Story? Their style of horror doesn't usually go after that trashy exploitation or slasher film element, so this is something completely new for them. We all love those 80s slasher movies, the cheesiness, the campiness.
I not only love that they're going with the slasher aspect of it, it's that you know they're not going to make it as a typical slasher. Mm-hmm. They'll put some typical slasher tropes in there, but you know that this season is going to go to some crazy places that are beyond just your normal slasher.
So we'll be checking that out. Probably within the next couple of weeks, we'll give an update on our thoughts on American Horror Story 1984.
And finally, our last news story is the It Chapter 2 is on track to earn the franchise a global box office of $1 billion. So far, the film has made over $160 million domestic and $179 million globally. The film is a box office smash, and it's on track to finish off with a $500 million worldwide, which would push the franchise over $1 billion.
That's quite something to have a horror franchise achieve $1 billion with just 2 films.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive, and it shows how mainstream horror has become. And Michael and I actually had the opportunity to watch It Chapter 2.
We touched on it last week in the interview with Hart, and he didn't like it, and I don't necessarily disagree with some of his points, but none of the complaints that he had made me not like the movie. I liked more than I didn't like in it.
I actually got to see it 2 times. I was able to clarify how I felt about a lot of it. The movie has its flaws, and I'll start off with that. It seems like it goes sometimes from set piece to set piece to set piece, and by the end of the movie, it was kind of strange, and I think you agree with me on this. It has a finale that seems like it's straight out of a Marvel movie. It reminded me of Avengers Endgame, of all the Avengers facing off against Thanos, except the Losers Club is substituted for the Avengers, and Pennywise is in the Thanos role. And it's like a big spectacle at the end, and it was very odd to see a horror movie done like that.
Much better than the conclusion of the miniseries.
Oh yeah, but it caught me a little bit off guard because it's not something I expect to see in a horror movie. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that in a horror movie, so it made me feel a little bit strange. So I could see how people would have bad reactions to that. And obviously the storyline is not as strong as the first half. The first half is always the better story. Having said that, this movie is, like I said, it's not perfect, but it does so much right that I can't complain too much. I left the theater satisfied both times when I seen it. It's highly enjoyable, and it gets enough right to just enough right to be a very worthy addition, a very worthy follow-up to the original It from the 2017 It.
I'm very impressed with what they threw at the wall on this one, and I'm even more impressed with what stuck and how much of it stuck.
I think that's why the movie comes out like it does, is because, like you said, it has that type of approach where we have a big budget on a horror movie like this, and we're going to go throw everything against the wall to see what sticks. What does stick, that works really, really well.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the big set pieces that made it feel like a blockbuster. It was the large music swells, and they seem to increase, like from the halfway point on. The big music swells seemed to increase, and the scenes got bigger and bigger.
And it's also the A-list cast brings a lot of a more blockbuster vibe. To have Jessica Chastain and James McAvoy play leading characters in this film is impressive. But I guess the most impressive performance I'd have to agree with, and everybody else is talking about, is Bill Hader as Richie.
Yeah.
I really liked him a lot. He brought a lot of humor without it being inappropriate. It seemed a lot of the times when humor is used in horror movies, sometimes it could undercut the tension or ruin what it's going for. And there are a couple of scenes in here where I was like, I could have done without the humor. For example, there's a scene that takes place in a basement, and some goofy song starts playing in the middle of a horror scene, and it just stops.
Yeah, I didn't understand that at all.
And when I saw it a second time, and I'm not going to ruin what it is, I won't go into much detail, but it has a strange song cue that comes in the middle of a horror scene. It comes out of nowhere, and it just stops randomly. And it seems kind of goofy. I don't know what they were going for or what the intended effect was, but it doesn't work. However, Bill Hader, for the most part, works because, as a character, the fact that he's so quippy, he plays the grown-up version of Richie from the original, and he's a successful comedian. And I view his humor as sort of a defense mechanism, as how he deals with fear. So it's more integral to his character, where I feel that doesn't really do any damage to the film.
Yeah, you don't feel like it's the director or writer forcing comedy into a dramatic situation. You feel like it's that character needs his own comic relief in order to cope with what he's seeing and hearing. And plus, that's just how he reacts to things.
Yeah. And he brings a lot of warmth. I feel like it's very satisfying because they switch back and forth between the adult characters and the child versions of themselves. So they brought back the cast from the original one. Other than a couple of moments where I could tell that these young actors were de-aged with some CGI on the face that looked kind of strange.
Yeah.
I feel like their presence in the movie was very welcome, and it helped to put things a lot more in perspective and give the movie a little bit more of an emotional drive by having them appear throughout flashbacks. And it fits in a lot of what they couldn't fit in the first film.
One thing about this film that I didn't expect, really, was these amazing actors played all the adult versions of the kids, right? Mm-hmm. And every single one was spot on. I was invested in the story of every single one. I believed every word that every single one of them said. I couldn't have asked for a better adult version of any of those characters, but the kids were still more compelling.
They were, but what I found really interesting about it is, like, Eddie, for example, the actor who plays him, James Ransom, he looks so much like the child version of Eddie that they actually do a transition scene where they superimpose their faces onto each other, and it genuinely looks like you're looking at an aged version of the same person. So the casting for the adults is fucking spot on.
And he captured Eddie's mannerisms too.
The mannerisms, so...
And I like that actor too. He was in Sinister and Sinister 2.
Overall, I really like the cast. I don't want to ruin the opening scene, but the opening scene's very shocking, and it deals with the hate crime and homophobia, and it's very raw and real, and it lies outside the realm of fantastical horror. Of like the more mythological aspects of Pennywise. It's something more realistic that happens, and it's a powerful scene that kind of jars you and shocks you. You're dealing so much with real horror that when Pennywise is inserted into the situation, it seems eerie or very odd. And I don't want to describe it in detail because you should experience it yourself, but it was a very powerful opening scene that just fucking drew me into the movie right away.
It seems like something more wrong when you see Pennywise, and you feel like he's pouring salt into a wound that's already there before you even see him.
And it kind of shows how Pennywise has exerted and kind of feeds off the negative energy of Derry as a town, the bigotry, the hatred, the anger. So it makes sense that this particular hate crime is the way that Pennywise would choose to reveal himself back to the world after 27 years. You can tell he totally feeds off of that.
And one of the thugs from that scene, I forgot the actor's name, but it's the guy from It Follows.
Jake Weary.
Is he ever going to play a likable character, dude? He's like one of the thugs in that opening scene, and you hate him. And with very little time on the screen, you hate him just as much as you love the two characters that
get attacked.
This is being done to. Yeah, because you're endeared to them pretty much right away.
Yeah.
And I was personally surprised to see, pleasantly surprised to see a gay kiss in the opening scene of a movie that they knew was going to be a blockbuster movie. I think that was a good chance that they took that paid off.
And I'm glad that they put it because it's such it's an integral part to the original novel by Stephen King.
Yeah.
It's part of the opening. They completely ejected it from the miniseries in 1990. And not only that, there's a little bit more subtext to that, and I don't want to reveal it because if you haven't seen it, I think you should discover it on your own. There's a little bit more subtext to that where there's a lot of subtext about homophobia in the original It novel that was completely thrown out of the 1990 miniseries. It's probably because it was on television in 1990. The times were different, and the restrictions on TV that they couldn't tackle a part that's actually very important to the story of It. So I was glad that they incorporated that.
And it's not forced into this one like a lot of people think it is.
Oh, no, not at all.
It was in the original story, and it was integral to it.
It's very integral to it. But there's a lot of good moments, a lot of good set pieces. It's exciting. Like I said, it's a little bit too exciting at the end. We're like, God damn, this is like the Avengers.
Yeah.
But overall, it was satisfying. And of course, Bill Skarsgård, really good as Pennywise. One of my favorite scenes of his in this takes place under the bleachers. Under a pair of bleachers with a little girl. And I gotta say, they really fuck kids up in this movie. It's like, damn, these kids get chomped on or just demolished. It's pretty shocking to see that kind of child horror in the context of such a mainstream movie that's making a lot of money. So it's pretty risky in a lot of ways.
It's so funny to see people complain so much about that opening scene, but he eats children, dude.
Yeah, it's like he eats children. And like I said, I think it has to do with the fact that Pennywise feeds off of bigotry, fear of being who you are. And that's kind of why he goes after children, because if a child's fear is easier to manifest physically than adult's fear, because the fears as you get older obviously become more abstract. And in the novel, I believe Stephen King describes it as since he feeds every 20 years and he goes after children because they're the easiest to get inside their head, it's like salting the meat before the feast. but it's nice to see a horror movie with such production value thrown into it. Another one of my minor complaints is that there's occasionally the CGI doesn't work for me. There's a couple spots where I was like, I don't know if they could have kept that out. I saw a couple shots that they couldn't, that they could have, I feel like they could have taken out of the movie. But what's surprising is how much of it actually works, though.
Yeah. There was a lot of CGI, but there was also a lot of practical effects. And there were some shots that I seen, like you didn't have to go CGI on that one. That one could have very well been practical without a lot of added budget or anything.
Yeah, they could have achieved some of it practically. It definitely has more CGI than the 2017 one.
Yeah, so I see that complaint, and I also see the complaint where some people say that Pennywise isn't as scary. I don't think overall he's as scary as the first one, but he is effective in this one. I think he's even more effective overall. It's just that it didn't elicit as much fear in me. Like a couple of the scenes did, but all the individual scares, all the individual set pieces of the scares for each character's sensibilities, I think were all solid and really well done.
It's a worthy conclusion to the film that we saw in 2017, and probably going to be the definitive screen telling of it for a very long time.
The good things that it had about it had a lot of it. It had good drama, had a lot of good drama. You know, good suspense, a lot of good suspense. You know, good horror scenes, good gore, and a lot of good horror scenes and good gore. So it was a lot of everything that they were doing in this movie. They did not sit on their hands on this one. And they even had some scenes like the one with the old lady with nuance. I don't think it hurt the movie at all that you've seen so much of that scene with the old lady in the trailer.
It's in different contexts, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't see that trailer where the scene with the old, where they play out the scene with the old lady, because I can tell by the reactions that, a lot of people in here are seeing this scene for the first time. My other minor complaint with this is the character of Henry Bowers.
Yeah.
He's almost pointlessly shoehorned into it, and his introduction is kind of creepy and it's kind of cool, but ultimately it kind of goes nowhere. The fact that Pennywise sets him loose, he has a few good scenes, and then he meets his demise. And that's the one thing that I think the original miniseries does better than this, is the use of that character as an avatar of like a human manifestation of all of Pennywise's anger and hatred and the negativity that he feeds off of. Yeah. Where I feel that he could have been used more he felt throwaway to me.
Yeah.
I felt like if you would have taken him out, other than a couple scenes to move something along, the character didn't really affect the story that much.
Yeah.
And he did look a lot like the original Henry Bowers. That was another interesting choice, that they made him look so much like the miniseries.
Yeah, but I like that they showed his dead friend coming to get him in a car. So
like I said, there's cool scenes with him.
Yeah.
I like when he's in the mental institute and he realizes that Pennywise is starting to pay attention to him again, or he's back. And the way that it's done and introduced is all really effective. It just feels like when it's done, you're like, okay, but what was the point of bringing him in if that's all you're going to do?
You get the feeling that maybe some more of his scenes were filmed and cut out?
Possibly. As it is, this is already almost 3 hours long, so it's a pretty damn long movie.
Yeah.
So probably due to time constraints, as it is, it's pretty long. Combine this with the length of the original film, this is an epic telling of a story that was already over 1,000 pages. I think it's like 1,400 pages.
Yeah.
So even with two big films like this, you still can't fit everything in that Stephen King had in the novel. If you really want to experience everything that's in the novel, then go read the novel.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
And the haters of these two new It films. I don't care what you think of them. They mean a lot to the horror genre. And not just to big movies, it's going to mean a lot to the indie world too, because it's bringing a lot of new fans into the genre.
I could understand if you're not appreciative of it, or if you don't like this version of it, but it is a positive thing for the horror genre. Just like how you said that you weren't a big fan of Us.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot, but you weren't a big fan of it. As a success, as a big budget film that's being funded by an original horror film being funded by a major studio, and making that much money, it opens up possibilities for other horror filmmakers to get their dream visions funded. So all of the success, whether or not the film is good, is a good thing for horror.
Yeah, and I appreciate that it's bold and takes chances.
Yes.
Still with the high stakes of it being such a moneymaker.
Mike and I both really dug It Chapter 2. Flaws and all.
Yeah, we didn't
Still totally worth seeing.
Yeah, didn't love everything about it, but just the sheer amount that they threw at you. I didn't mention it before. Probably one of the scariest Pennywise scenes is when he wasn't the clown, when he was just almost human. He had a little bit of the makeup on and he rakes his hands down his face.
Oh, when you see him applying the makeup?
Yeah.
I like those scenes because it indicates a human past for Pennywise that you know he doesn't have, but he might have. And you get to see pictures of him in a carnival in the circus a long time ago. So it kind of opened... I don't know if it should be explored, but it definitely puts a lot of mystery into his character because we know he's this ancient entity, but at the same time, he's taken the form of some kind of human, and you could see a little bit of his past. So I think that's kind of an interesting area as far as the mythology of Pennywise goes.
And a much better giant spider this time. You had to have a giant spider because it's in the book. So
that's the way it is.
Better than the stop motion.
You're listening to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show Podcast.
So Mike and I saw another big horror release, another big release for the horror community, From HELl.
Yes.
Rob Zombie's follow-up to The Devil's Rejects, completing his Firefly family trilogy. We both dug it. But before we talk about that movie, we're going to get to another Rob Zombie movie that we watched, 31.
Yeah, and
let's get this out of the way.
It was completely by chance that this came up. We play Horror Tubi Roulette all the time on the show.
That's one of our segments.
Yeah,
where we go through the Tubi TV app, which is available through Amazon Prime. They have a giant horror section, so we close our eyes and scroll through it, and then whatever once we stop, we just stop wherever without looking. And once we stop, we have to look up at the screen to see where we landed, and that's the film we have to watch and review for the podcast.
Yeah.
We both landed on 31 at the same time.
We've never landed on the same movie before.
And there's over so many movies, and the chances of you landing on the same movie are really rare.
And landing on this movie just before From HELl comes out.
Yeah, and it's a movie that Mike and I have never been big fans of. I don't really like bashing movies, but a second viewing didn't convince me. I don't like the movie. It really doesn't work for me. There's a couple things I like about it, namely Richard Brake as Doomhead.
Yeah.
I like him. And Sherry Moon Zombie, who I'm getting convinced that the hate that she gets is completely unwarranted, especially after seeing her in 31
and her
performance in From HELl. Yeah. She's a really good final girl, which makes me a little bit more pissed off is that the fate of her character is so flippant that it actually irritated me, the way that the movie ends. And I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the movie cheats and then does something really unexpected with the ending. Like, oh, okay, I guess. And then it undoes the cheat where you're like, what was the point of even doing that?
Yeah.
What was the point? So all the characters in this movie are not appealing in any way at all. Everything is extra trashy for the sake of being trashy. Every victim is nasty and perverted and degenerate and filthy and scummy. Something too overly self-consciously edgy about it that none of it really works for me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just monotonous scenes and the violence just fucking pounds away and it's generic. And there's so much shaky cam in this that half the time you can't even see what's going on. On the other hand, there's some good kills, but most of the good kills actually don't go for the victims, they're for the clowns.
Yeah.
The clowns that are killing everybody in this film.
Even though I still don't like it, I am glad that I watched it again because I had nothing but hate for it. Not really hate, just really disliked it, and there was nothing about it that I liked at all. So I really tried to look at it and be more positive about it this time. I went through and I pinpointed a lot of things that I actually liked about it, but along with the things you like about it, there's so much that you don't. It kind of cancels out what you do like.
For every good thing, there's 10 bad things.
Yeah. And as far as I'm concerned, the movie goes off the rails from the opening scene. It opens, there's old music playing, a mean man approaches the camera.
Doomhead played by Richard Brake.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. A mean man approaches the camera and it's an extreme close-up, and that's when it goes off the rails right there. And then you find out that it's Doomhead, and you slowly find out.
It starts off in a monologue way where it looks like the character is addressing the audience and trying to scare the shit out of you.
Yeah.
And it kind of works until there's a reveal that he's been talking to a victim when the camera pans.
Yeah.
And then you realize the victim's been making noise and like scared the entire time, but he was entirely silent during the speech, so he could trick us into thinking like I don't know, it just felt like it didn't work.
It went on way too long. There was no color in it, which just didn't work at all. Didn't make it feel any more eerie or vintage or anything like that.
There's not very much suspense, and it's hard to... Other than Sherry Moon Zombie, I had a hard time caring about any of the victims that were going on. And then you get to see Malcolm McDowell and his powdered wig and makeup. I don't know, were they aristocrats who oversee sadistic games of murder and torture? Yeah. I think the film's kind of fuzzy on what it is. It's obviously rich elite people who are very bored, so I kind of get what that's going for. I really like Rob Zombie as a filmmaker. I think he has a very unique vision, and I think maybe the reason... And he's a very passionate filmmaker. If nothing else, you could tell that all of his films are made with a lot of love and passion, even if you don't like them. And I think that's why his films that don't work for me really don't work for me, because it's a special kind of, in my opinion, not good, that could only come from throwing so much at the screen and being so into it that you kind of are not seeing the bigger picture. You're overlooking certain things. The second viewing, I didn't like it. Like I said, I don't hate it, but there isn't much there for me to grasp onto except for a couple elements that I thought were kind of enjoyable.
The first thing that I liked about it was Richard Brake as Doomhead, but I think he wasn't used properly. And
he could have been used better.
He was used to take you out of the movie in the first scene, so it kind of kills his character. And then him in the finale kind of kills his character too. Because he comes off as really stupid. Because he
does something at the end that is almost... It has to do with the ending that I was talking about, that it seems like a little bit of a cheat, but kind of interesting that they end up undoing, where he rambles so much after a while you're like, please, stop talking and just get to killing, and they make a joke out of it. And I'm not sure if it works or not.
It had a bad opening scene with a good actor. But then that's followed by the opening sequence with a really good song by James Gang. So that's...
that's another thing I like, the soundtrack. It has a good soundtrack. And of course, Rob Zombie, being a musician and coming from the world of music, he knows how to pick good music. There's no doubting that.
So that's the next good thing I noticed. And then it follows up that good thing with a van full of victims. Once again, a van full of victims, and it consists of a fake redneck, a fake Rasta, people you would never believe were hanging out together, just acting ridiculous and have a mundane
and they all act very trailer park trashy, whereas why is a Rasta person acting like they were raised in a trailer park? Or all these people seem like they would come from the same background, even though they're obviously different.
And all the females are hoes and all the guys are trash.
Yeah, that's all. It's too, I don't know, there's something about it that just too much.
Well, Malcolm McDowell in a powdered wig, that's different. He explains the survive this death house for 12 hours and you live, and then they kind of go back on their own rules, and then it's all kind of meaningless, really.
Yeah,
it's kind of a Running Man type of thing, or Hunger Games, where the rich or elite
bet on who can survive the most through the most brutal, fucked up torture that you could imagine.
Yeah. And a lot of it was set up in a cheesy, campy way, the way Running Man was, like a wrestling match or something.
Yeah.
But a lot of the kills were very effective. When you see all these annoying characters, the van full of annoying characters, fake characters, and then when they get ambushed, holy shit, that's fucking scary. But it's killed by the freeze frame shit. That took me right out of it. I don't know why he did that. That was a very good ambush scene, and then he does the freeze frame and kind of kills it. Sickhead was awesome in it. The little person played by Pancho Moeller, who was also awesome in 3 from Hell.
Oh yeah, it's a much better role in 3 from Hell, even though he's not playing a psycho.
He comes out in 31 as a little person Hitler speaking Spanish. He was the best.
That actually was pretty cool. I was like, why is he in a Hitler? Why is he dressed up like a Nazi and shouting at these people in Spanish? I think it works just because it's so fucking odd that it just seems like, who would think of something like that? It's so strange. And I could see how Rob Zombie was very drawn to him as an actor enough to use him again in 3 from Hell. And like I said, in 3 from Hell, I think he's used even better.
Yes.
And it's also in a much better movie is what helps it too.
And his kill was another awesome one when he was killed, but that's one of the few points in the movie where I feel it was overkill.
Yeah.
Where it took his kill a little too far and it seemed gratuitous for no good reason. Another problem I seen with it where it could have been a good scene based on the premise of it, which was, fuck it, I'm going to give it away. When they all realize that they're eating their friend and they're just chowing down. First of all, it doesn't make sense that they just start chowing down on this food that's presented to them.
It makes the characters look dumb and like, if you were in the setting where you're being chased around and tortured by psychotic, unsparing clowns, would you really trust the food that they give you or serve you? Would you really sit down? I wouldn't fucking eat shit in there. I'd be like, I ain't eating anything from these people.
Yeah.
So it's revealed, like you said, that they end up eating one of their friends who was killed. But how do they cook him and prepare him that fast? And I don't know.
And not only that, but remember when the reveal happened? The reveal happens, and then it's a slideshow of the guy in his life, like pictures, a slideshow of that character. And then the slideshow goes by, and it shows his friend puking after eating him. So it was effective that he was eating his friend, but it was a really cheap effect as far as I'm concerned. Having a slideshow right before you show the friend puking him up.
Shut your mouth, or I'll make a jack-o'-lantern out of your best friend's head.
But it's kind of funny on paper. But
on paper, it sounds like a good idea, but when you see it, it's just like, whoa, that really didn't work.
Psycho Head, I guess that was the name of both of those clowns. Mm-hmm. But it was like a bad wrestling event. But that's another good part. Their kill was very effective.
Yeah, they had one of the best scenes in the movie.
And then you have Sex and Death. And their quirky style was not genuine. Mm-hmm. But once again, damn good kills. Yes. Excellent kills of the bad guys. That's one thing you can say about this movie. Had good bad guys. Some of them weren't used very well. But there were good bad guys and there were good kills of the bad guys, but not very good kills of the victims.
As I said, there's some stuff in here, so I'm glad that I rewatched it because I could see now getting over the initial disappointment. I still don't think this movie really works, but I could see some elements in there that do work, and I could see more of Rob Zombie's talent peeking out behind this film. Yeah. On a second viewing, I could see what he might have been going for here or there.
Why is the stabbing so fucking loud?
Oh yeah, all the stabbing sounds exaggerated.
It sounds like a punch and a stab and a twist, like all at the same time, like you're smashing someone with a boulder with a knife in it or something.
It just kind of became monotonous after a while.
Yeah.
For me, not enough nuance, not enough build-up, not enough characters worth caring about. It would just seem like he was trying to pound you over the head with the insanity, and we could have used a little bit more room for breathers in the movie. I think that would have helped it to calm down. Not everything has to be intense bashing.
The final thing, I'm just going to mention what we already brought up before, is the final scene, which something kind of cool happens, but it's a result of the main villain that you're supposed to be so scared of and supposed to be so smart, does something really stupid. And then on top of that, they give you a cop-out ending tacked on at the end. Mm-hmm. So that's everything I liked and disliked about 31.
Yep. I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So that was what we had to watch for Tor 2B Roulette.
Horror show exclusive.
So Mike and I are about to play another round where we're going to be forced to watch something that we don't know what it is.
Yeah, and
I hope it's good this time.
We will discuss 3 from Hell right after this, but we have to play 2B Roulette first.
Yes, 2B TV Roulette, then we'll discuss 3 from Hell. So I'm going to start off, all right, Michael?
Let's do it.
All right. I am scrolling.
So it's scrolling. I see I Spit on Your Grave, Tales of Halloween, The Fog remake. You missed a bullet on that one. Gothica, Dahmer, 31. You passed that one up.
Thank
You're
God.
Next.
Don't say anything right now. 1, 2. I usually don't go that far. I don't try to be brave, but I'll try to be a little braver.
Oh, you passed
5,
a good one.
4, 3, 2, 1. Stop.
Don't hang up.
2017. Don't hang up. The premise reads, an evening of drunken prank calls becomes a nightmare for a pair of teens when a mysterious stranger turns their game into something deadly. Directed by Damian Mace and Alex Wajbrat. I apologize. I don't like butchering names. I always feel bad about that.
I don't mean to just laugh, but you have to see the
thumbnail for this
it.
is goofy. It looks like a stoner comedy.
It's a guy with his hat on backwards, and he's got a dumb face on his head where he's laughing.
Oh my god.
Good luck, James. Don't hang up.
All right. Well, there we go. All right. I'm going to put this back to the beginning for you, and Mike is going to play his round of 2B roulette to see what he's going to have to discuss. Ooh, Lords of Salem. I would have liked to have landed on that just to keep the Rob Zombie thing going because I feel like I'm having like a big reappraisal of his work, especially after watching 3 from Hell. Damn,
this is a fun game. I like this.
All right, here you go, Michael. Do not look.
All right, I'm going to start scrolling. Here I go. Where it stops, nobody knows.
Wolves.
Yeah.
Gothica. Scombi.
All right, a little bit more, and I'll stop.
Gacy.
Right here.
The Burrows, 1918 in the 18. All right, the Burrows from 2008. In the 1870s Dakota territories, a family of settlers suddenly go missing, seemingly at the hands of hostile natives. Always demonizing the natives.
I know, right?
However, when a group of explorers set out to find them, it soon becomes apparent that something much more sinister is to blame. Directed by J.T. Petty, starring Clancy Brown. I actually know Clancy Brown, to me, because I grew up on this DC animated series.
Yeah.
He's the voice of Lex Luthor on Superman the Animated Series, the 90s cartoon. So that's what I most identify him with.
And I most identify him with 2 things. It's Pet Sematary 2, and then that show Carnival.
I never saw that. That's the HBO show, correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Excellent. Way too short-lived series. So this one looks promising.
Actually,
it's got an excellent star.
What you have definitely looks more interesting than what I landed on, I'll tell you that much.
It's a period piece, so let's see. It expires in 11 days, so I better hurry.
All right, you better watch it quick. So that was our round of Horror 2B Roulette.
Horror show exclusive.
All right, so 3 from Hell was released this past week in the US, and it was only playing for 3 nights. They made it a Fathom event, so this wasn't even something. It wasn't even listed as a normal movie screening. A Fathom event is what does like the concerts at the movie theaters and the opera houses. So he made it kind of an event where it's playing for 3 nights. It played unrated. It played Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night. So if you went to night 1, you got a poster with 3 from Hell. If you went to night 2, which was what Mike and I attended, you got to see a very good behind-the-scenes documentary after the film. And if you went on night 3, you got to see a double feature of The Devil's Rejects and 3 from Hell. I would have liked to have gone to all 3 screenings just to get the different thing out of it each time.
Yeah, interesting release strategy.
Yeah, and when I was watching it, I didn't realize. I thought it was just rated R, and I didn't really think much of it. But there's one particular scene that was so brutal and savage that the stabbing in it was so brutal and savage that I was like, is this rated R? That seems a bit extreme for a rated R movie. It seemed like a bit much. So he had a very interesting release strategy, and I'm glad we got to see it unrated and uncut. Imagine this is the only way that Rob Zombie was able to get an uncompromised cut, because I'm pretty sure the MPAA would have had a shit fit over this movie.
Yeah, and we seen it in the front row because it was almost sold out. So we were in the front row looking straight up, and it was a little too close for me. Not for aesthetic reasons, just for the brutality. It was right there in my face.
Yeah.
Huge.
But I gotta say, I liked this movie a lot. I really, really dug it. I was happy with it. The Devil's Rejects is one of my favorite horror films, possibly my favorite horror film of the early part of the 21st century.
Yeah.
And it's probably I think the best throwback to the grindhouse 70s hardcore exploitation films, the best throwback to those films. And I'm also a big fan of House of a Thousand Corpses. I love the characters of this universe. I love the family. Yeah. And I think Rob Zombie had a lot to live up to with this one, because it's because of the legacy of these characters within the horror community. And I was just so happy with how well he delivered with this film.
There were a few minor problems I had with it, but absolutely nothing to take me out of the movie, and nothing that would be a major complaint.
Yeah.
I would say that anything was bad about it.
It was very uncompromising, unsparing, the way that you would want a Rob Zombie movie to be. But with unlike 31, I feel like the victims were a lot better.
Yes.
The acting of the victims were a lot better. It was more convincing. It was more heart-wrenching when the victims were being fucked with. And the scenes were scarier. They were a lot more scarier.
The victims were real people.
Yeah. There was that strain of the sadism, that humorous sadism that the Firefly family is really known for.
Yeah.
And the way that they torture their victims and the way they play mental games and they tie them up for a long time. And they do all sorts of fucked up shit. And it didn't disappoint in any way. And I think this movie really kicks ass. It's exactly the type of 70s exploitation film I was craving out of it. Even though this takes place, I read it takes place in the late 80s, and you even see a photo of Ronald Reagan in the background at one point. Other than that, you would never know that this takes place in the 80s. It looks like a 70s film. It looks like in that universe the 70s went on and they never died. The look, the style, the aesthetic, it's gritty, it's raw. And I absolutely loved the lead performances in this one from Sherry Moon Zombie. Gives her best performance as Baby Firefly.
Yes.
And this is another reason I need to defend her. Like, I've always noticed that she gets such shit in the horror community for her acting because she's so over the top in The Devil's Rejects. If you think that, this isn't going to change your mind, and you're probably going to think even worse of her. But I was so impressed with the performance because this takes place like a decade after The Devil's Rejects and after the Firefly family has been in prison for a very long time, and it's a believable mental deterioration that she's experiencing. So she's even more wild and more over the top than she's ever been.
Yeah, and I would venture so far as to say she was scary.
Yeah, she was scary as fuck to me. Like, she really horrified me. She reminded me a little bit of Mother Firefly in the beginning. She started taking on aspects of that character from the past series who obviously died in The Devil's Rejects. She really starts to take up that role, and it's a very unhinged performance that requires the actor to really go for it. It takes balls to deliver that type of performance where you're just pitched at this really high level and going deliriously over the top, but I believed every second of her performance as Baby Firefly. She was, for me, the standout of the movie, and part of what made it such an enjoyable experience was her character, her sadism, her new levels of insanity, and even her quiet, reflective moments were something that were oddly endearing.
Yeah, she wasn't just a wild flake character. She wasn't just wild the whole time. She was nuanced.
Yeah.
And she had a personality, and she seemed like a real person, and plus she had the scare factor. It was awesome.
So she really stole the show for me in this one, and that's saying something because Bill Moseley is just as good as he's ever been as Otis Driftwood. I was happy to see that character back. Still the same Otis Driftwood, but different. And that's another thing that I feel that this film nails and gets right, since it takes place so long after the last one. These characters are at a different place in their lives, and I believed every minute of it because it seemed like a natural progression. Like, yeah, that's how these characters would be in about 10 years later. They would be like this.
They were just different enough for it to be believable, the aging.
But it's the same people. And I even told you this is going to sound really bizarre because I feel like saying this gives it I'd be misrepresenting by expressing my feelings about the characters. I ended up feeling very endeared to the family.
Yeah.
More than I have in even the previous installments where there was warmth to it.
Yeah.
That sounds so fucking weird because when you say there's warmth and there's even a little bit of a tenderness, I loved the family bond between Otis and Baby because Sid Haig is only in this for, like we said earlier, for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And, I mean, obviously Sid Haig is Sid Haig. And what worried me was Captain Spaulding was such a big part of what made The Devil's Rejects work that I was worried his absence would hurt the film, and it doesn't. It actually really doesn't hurt it. And, in fact, it's done in such a way that I can't even picture Captain Spaulding within the context of this movie outside the opening 10 minutes.
That was one of the most impressive things about it, that Rob Zombie wrote this movie with From HELl with his 3 characters from the other movies, and pretty much last minute before he started filming.
3 weeks before shooting.
Yeah, all of a sudden I have to switch this around and make one of the three from hell a different dude. And I'll be damned if he pulled it off, and pulled it off very fucking well.
I couldn't tell. To me, it seems like it was intentional. The third character that we have is Foxy. His name is Foxy, and he's played by Richard Brake from 31, who played Doomhead in 31, one of the highlights of 31.
He's Winslow Foxworth Coltrane.
Winslow Foxworth Coltrane. And he's the half-brother of Baby and Otis that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
I bought that, even though you've never heard of this character, mainly because the Devil's Rejects made very clear that the family goes a lot further than just the immediate family. It seems like it's an extended family of psychos and murderers and and crazy people. So I bought it and it worked for me.
My favorite scenes with Richard Brake were like when he was taunting one of the victims. He'd done something really horrible with something that meant a lot to her. Mm-hmm. And I thought he came off as really diabolical on that one. And the other scenes that were my favorite with him was his reaction, because he was next to Bill Moseley a lot, because Sherry Moon went off on her own a lot.
Yes.
And because
before being reeled back in with them.
Yeah, so she got so restless that she would want to just go out and kill people. She would get bored and she would want to murder.
Yeah.
But the way Richard Brake,
he was incorporated really well.
Yeah, the way he would just be with Otis a lot of the times, and the way he would react to Otis's brutality. Sometimes he would smile, but sometimes he would cringe a little bit.
Be like, damn, that's a bit much.
So I really liked watching that aspect of it.
And the violence in this movie, if you're going for this movie because you want to see a kick-ass exploitation movie that is unrelentingly brutal, it's not going to disappoint you on that front. Yeah. But what's most surprising earlier, as I said, I felt a warmth to these characters where I feel that's a weird dichotomy where I was enraged at them at times and horrified of them, and the victims broke my heart, and seeing them slaughtered so brutally, so viciously, and so heartlessly was shocking, and you don't cheer for them. But when they're isolated away from their madness and they start just hanging out, there's a quality of it that reminded me a little bit of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where you get to hang out and spend time with the characters. And obviously that's going to upset a lot of people by making you identify with these homicidal maniacs. But hey, it's a fucking horror movie. It's not real, so I don't feel bad about that. But it's just very interesting that Otis Driftwood and Baby Firefly have a wistfulness to them now. Yeah. There's like an existential quality where there's even a moment where they start talking about the past, people that they've lost. Why are we here? What are we doing on this planet? What's it all worth in the end? Yeah. And they talk about, Otis says, you know what, life doesn't make sense, but as long as we're here, we can cause some crazy destruction. We can fuck shit up together. And in a way, it's kind of relatable. If you substitute the psychotic murdering with something that you're into, like for me and Mike, it's the podcast and our television series and filmmaking. That's what keeps us going in this insane world. For them, it's psychotic murdering. That's a really bad outlet, but there's something strangely relatable about their quiet moments together that I felt very endeared to the characters, and by the end, I was rooting for them all to fucking make it out again, even though I was horrified by all of their crimes and their victims really broke my heart, and it's unsparing. So I'm really impressed that Rob Zombie was able to achieve that balance between feeling sympathy for the devil and recognizing how sick and fucking how awful these people are. It left me with a very strange feeling because I got the satisfying brutal exploitation movie, and I got a movie where I felt endeared to the main characters. So that's one of the things that I loved about this one.
Well, I loved how almost every aspect of the movie was pushed to the edge. Mm-hmm. The brutality was pushed to the edge where it was almost too much, and then pulled back just for effectiveness. Even when it pulled back, that was effective. Mm-hmm. And there was some humor in it, and it was almost too much humor, and then it was pulled back.
It seems like it teetered on the edge of going off the rails, but it never did. Or Rob Zombie knew just when he's like, okay, I pushed it enough now to switch to something else. Yeah. Too sentimental, No, it's brutal. Too gratuitous and violent. No, we're going to slow it down. It had a lot of what I felt was missing from 31, the nuance, the suspense, the quiet moments in between. And because of that, the brutality is so much more effective. And there's a little shaky cam here. One time, it's a very clever use that involves Baby Firefly, and the scene would not work as well without a shaky cam, and you'll have to see it to understand what I mean. I saw a couple of scenes where it bothered me a little bit, but it's nowhere near as excessive as 31.
Yeah.
And it only peaks in here and there. And I love the editing of the movie. It has that free-form, wild editing that you kind of saw in the House of a Thousand Corpses, tempered down a little bit, and like somewhere between that and the Devil's Rejects.
And perfected.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. Wow, that editing, dude. It was so effective. It makes you feel every kill. It makes you feel every bit of that film.
The way that the scenes flow into each other is another thing that I really liked about it. It felt very well, a really well edited together film that really just flows out really good. And I kind of feel like, I know this is going to get some backlash, and we've already seen some of it, some people saying it's crap or anything. I don't see that. I honestly think that if you're a fan of The Devil's Rejects, I don't see how you could be disappointed by this follow-up. Obviously, I think, of course, I still have a preference for The Devil's Rejects because that's the movie that made me such a big fan of these characters in horror. But this film, for me, feels like a natural progression, and I feel like I got to catch up with old friends that I hadn't seen in a long time. Granted, these friends are fucking scary, but it felt like catching up with old friends and seeing what they've been up to in the intervening years to see how they've changed, how they developed.
Yeah.
And they have changed quite a bit the way that people do as they grow older. They just so happen to be psychotic killers.
And he really knocked it out of the park with these characters that we know and love.
Yeah.
And he knocked it out of the park with every fucking supporting character. Especially Pancho Moller, Sebastian, the little person.
From 31.
Yes. He was one of the best parts of the movie. He had a little patch on.
He was really endearing. You know what's crazy is that Baby Firefly is so horrifying in this movie, but one of her best moments is when she's quietly eating breakfast and smoking a joint, and they just start talking about life, and then she starts talking about her brother Tiny, who is really large monster from the original, from the first two, from Corpses and Rejects, and how she's telling the little person that you remind me of him because the way that you walk, the way that you carry yourself, where it almost seemed like, damn, if Baby wasn't such a fucking nut job, she might be cool to hang out with.
Yeah.
If you could endear yourself to her first, she'll probably have your back to the end, but if you're anybody else, you'll probably get slaughtered mercilessly.
And the acting of Pancho Moller in that scene, like when she first says, "You remind me of Tiny," is oh yeah, Tiny. He figures it's just another little person. So no, he's a giant. So you remind me of him. You carry yourself like a giant. And just the change in his face when he thought that she was just talking about another little person to that she was talking about a giant, his face lit up. But it was so subtle.
Very. And there's a lot of good character moments in this movie between.
And it made every scene he was in after that more effective because of that one scene where he connected with Sherry Moon, or Baby.
I agree. Another thing I really liked about it was the look of the movie. I feel like with each of these films in this, what's a trilogy so far, each one has their own distinctive vibe and feel, where I'd say this is a little bit closer to The Devil's Rejects than House of a Thousand Corpses, but it still has some of the extreme stylistic, colorful choices of House of a Thousand Corpses, but brought down closer to reality and tempered with an older filmmaker's vision.
Yeah, this is more visual. I love the set pieces. I love the wardrobe, the makeup. Everything was so good.
And then by the end of the movie, it just basically becomes a Western. Let's be honest. The last part of the movie is not even a horror movie anymore.
It's a Western showdown.
And I read that one of the big influences on this series is the Wild Bunch, which Rob Zombie has said since The Devil's Rejects. I feel like with this one, the Wild Bunch influence is a lot more clear with the big violent action spectacle showdown in Mexico. Yeah. At the end in Mexico.
Well, that was one of my only problems with it. It was the climax was a bit too convenient. Like they were up against worse odds than how it played out. Yeah. Like the odds they were faced up against, they didn't realistically overcome those odds, but it was still a really good, really effective scene.
Yeah,
you had to suspend a little bit of disbelief.
Yeah, but it still worked. And overall, I liked the entire movie. I enjoyed it the whole way through. It was appropriately brutal. It even shocked me a little bit with some of its violence. And I don't want to describe any of the kill scenes because I really think you should experience themselves. You have Clint Howard popping in a bizarre role as a clown that you have to see.
Mr. Baggy Britches.
Mr. Baggy Britches. Oh, man, he adds an extra layer of wrongness to one particular scene that just makes you feel, oh.
And he doesn't even need to be there, but it doesn't matter. He's
kind of shoehorned into the movie, and it serves no purpose in the movie. And if you took it out, it wouldn't make a difference. But I wouldn't take it out because it makes a certain scene so much more wrong and uncomfortable and eerie. Just the strange visual of him in the context of a hopeless and despairing situation.
Yeah, it's not the typical way the clown is presented in a horror film, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, all in all, as a fan of this franchise, I feel that Rob Zombie really did it proud, and he lived up to the reputation and the quality of the previous films. I would probably say, it's a little bit early to say, but after reflecting on it for a couple days, I think this is my second favorite one in the franchise. I think it's a little bit better of a film than House of a Thousand Corpses. Although, of course, only time will tell. I still like The Devil's Rejects more, but it's really good, like I said. And if you're a fan of Rob Zombie, and if you're a fan of these characters, I can't see how you would not like this movie.
I have to mention another excellent supporting cast performance from Dee Wallace.
Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. She plays Greta.
The prison guard, Greta the prison guard, who is guarding Sherry Moon, and she obviously has some kind of fascination / obsession with her, and she hates her and loves her at the same time.
And the way that Sherry Moon Zombie gets inside her head and starts taunting her with the fact that, you know that you're really into me. The only reason that you torture me and are sadistic with me and treat me like shit is because you fantasize about me. You're into me. And she does a scene that's taunting that seems a lot like Mother Firefly in The Devil's Rejects.
Yeah.
That wild sexual abandon, thinking everybody wants you, but a little scarier.
Yeah.
A little bit more dangerous.
And I love Dee Wallace, and she's so easily recognizable. But I did not recognize her. She was such...
It took a while to realize that was Dee Wallace.
Yeah, she was submerged in that character so deep that you didn't notice it. And then when you do notice it's her, it's this excitement floods you because her performance is so good. And it's such a small little section of the movie, but really memorable. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget those little exchanges between her and Sherry Moon.
Yeah.
Excellent. And for Sherry Moon to mix it up that well with the great Dee Wallace. Come on.
That shows how good. So this movie actually brought me a new level of respect for her as an actress.
Yeah.
As somebody who's really willing to go there and throw herself into a character with wild abandon that could fail, but for me works so well. This works very well.
She also mixed it up well with Sean Whalen, the victim in the sombrero.
Oh, yes. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was a really cool scene. Like, it was still was wrong.
It was wrong
because
funny. You were like, please get away from her. This woman is out of her fucking mind. Yeah. She's going to kill you. Don't follow her.
The whole time you're like, poor man, poor man. But what's so funny is the whole time she's talking to this guy, she's flirting with him, right? Mm-hmm. And you're thinking the whole time, poor guy, he's dead. But then later on when she talks to Sebastian, played by Pancho Moller, you never think that. You never think like, holy shit.
You could see it in the performance when she has designs on somebody for her own sadistic purposes. And you can see when she actually genuinely likes somebody and you know that she's not going to hurt them.
Yeah, so for me, the music was great. The editing was amazing. The acting was surprisingly good. It was even more violent and gory than I expected. And the directing is mature and the writing is elevated and it mostly works
on a lot of levels.
Yes.
And
I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too. And it's probably going to be making, by the end of the year, it'll probably be on my list of my top 10 horror films of 2019. I was just so thoroughly satisfied with it.
It's definitely for me too.
So, yeah, and I expected it to like it. I didn't expect to like it this much.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to like it this much. So I came out of that screening of it so fucking happy, and I was like, hell yes. It's Rob Zombie. He returned to those characters and he did them he did them justice. He gave me the sequel that I would have wanted. And I didn't think that The Devil's Rejects really needed or required a sequel. And it kind of still doesn't, to be honest. But it doesn't matter because we got one, and the one we got is fucking damn good and totally lives up to the reputation of the series.
And I never thought I would say this. I want another one.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind another one. I'm okay with seeing the new Foxy character with Richard Brake, seeing how they go on with those three.
And I want to see what Richard Brake does when he has more time to prepare that character.
And considering he had to go up against characters that already had a mythology built into the audience's mind, so he was kind of a third wheel. He doesn't stand out as much, but to be able to mix it up with those characters who are so well established in your brain and already come with their own mythology and not get buried is impressive itself. That's kind of an achievement.
It'd be very easy to look lame next to those two characters.
But he did not. No, not at all. So overall, Mike and I highly, highly, highly recommend go check out 3 from Hell.
Yep, one of the best of the year so far.
All right.
Tune in to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast, or I'll slice your fingers off.
We're going to talk about another 2019 horror movie. So we feel like we're getting into different levels of horror. We have It Chapter 2, which
we went big, and then we went a little smaller with Rob Zombie.
And now we're going to go really small with a German horror film that was only playing in limited release, and I believe it's left most theaters. We saw it a couple weeks. We were going to talk about it last week, but we didn't have the time. It's called LUZ.
We reported on this a year ago, right?
Yeah, and we finally saw it, and it's a German film. I'm going to read the premise just so we can put some of this into context, because this is a really unfathomable movie, and nothing that we can say about it is going to prepare you for what it is and what the experience. So I'm just going to read the premise that they give. A rainy night, dazed and numb, Luz, a young cab driver, drags herself into the brightly lit entrance of a rundown police station. In a night spot, Nora seductively engages police psychiatrist Dr. Rossini in a conversation. Nora tells the doctor about her schoolmate Luz's rebellious past at a Chilean Catholic school for girls. Nora is possessed by a demonic entity longing for the woman it loves, Luz. And goddamn, what a fucking unique movie.
Yeah.
I was very bewildered by it the entire time. It's deeply surreal, and I can understand this is going to be a turnoff for a lot of people are really not going to like this, and I imagine people are going to pull their hair out at this movie, or it's going to really frustrate you.
It actually frustrated me quite a bit.
It frustrated me a lot while I was watching it, but what's impressive is that this is a student thesis film from Germany.
Yeah.
It's a 70-minute film, and for all that it frustrates you and gets you pissed off at sometimes, it is so deliberate, and it's such a highly, highly controlled vision that you could see every choice is exactly as the director wanted it to be, and it's a deeply surreal experience. And when I say deeply surreal, I mean it's deeply surreal. Outside of David Lynch, I don't know if I've ever seen a movie that this inscrutable, the way that it gets inside your subconscious and the stylistic choices of it.
Yeah.
It's shot on 16mm Kodak film, which I think brings a lot to it. And it has such a strange, accomplished look to it.
Yeah.
And when we first walked out of the screening, Mike and I didn't really know what to say because it's kind of bewildering and baffling. And thinking about it, I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to discuss this movie or how to even put into words what it is or the feeling, because I just saved that premise just so you have some grounding if you go and see it. It's not going to ruin it for you because it's such an unprecedented film.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. I feel like it worked exactly as the director intended it to work, because when we watched it, I wasn't sure what was going on. And then you and I, Michael, when we started discussing and replaying the events of the movie and sequencing them, it started to make sense.
Yeah, I thought that I didn't know what the fuck was going on half the time. And then we were discussing it afterwards, like, wait, I kind of did.
You knew what was going on. It works in a way that like I said, this is really impressive to me. It bypasses normal narrative.
Yeah.
And hits your brain subconsciously, where even if you don't think anything's happening or you don't realize what it is, your brain is registering it somewhere in the back of your mind what's actually going on. And I kind of feel like it works exactly like a dream or a nightmare, where like if I'm sure you've woken up from a dream, you're like, damn, what the fuck was that about? That was just frightening and weird. And
the most frightening movies or most frightening dreams are confusing, and this was confusing until you think back on it and then analyze it, but it's just like a dream.
Yeah, just like a dream. You look back on it the way you look back on your dreams to try to figure it out, and once you start piecing it together in your mind, it starts to make sense. You're like, oh, that's why I was dreaming, and that's what it was about. So I actually am looking forward to... We only got to see it once. I'm really looking forward to a second viewing, because in my head, the movie makes a lot more sense to me now that I've recalled it. I was like, wow, I'm impressed that a student filmmaker doing a thesis, this is for a fucking film class, pulled off something that accomplished, a movie that's done in a way that's hard to fathom. And this is a possession movie. Yeah. I've never seen a possession movie like this before. No. I feel like it's completely unprecedented in horror. It resides in a genre that's very familiar, that we've seen done a dozen times, but you've never seen it done like this. You've never seen it play out like this.
I've never had a movie where I watched it and I even got frustrated with it, and then it kind of opens up to me the more I think about it, and especially talking about it. It just opened up and it adds layers to it after you're finished watching it.
And that's what I like about this movie, is that even if the initial viewing might be frustrating or unsatisfying, it's something that you could tell that multiple viewings, it'll start to reveal more of itself to you as you watch it more and more. You start to discover different nuances and different things and depth of meaning, where in my head, the film kind of makes sense now. Yeah. Even though it didn't make sense at first, I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. So if you go see this movie, or if you ever get a chance to watch it, think back hard on it and start replaying the events in the movie. Watch it with somebody else so you could have somebody to bounce it off. It'll make it easier, trust me. Yeah. And you'll want to talk about this after with somebody else. Start replaying the events of your head in the movie, and then the things are going to start to make a lot of sense, and you're going to have a lot of revelations and epiphanies about it.
And another unique thing about it that I never would have guessed if I hadn't read about it, but where the psychiatrist is hypnotizing LUZ. Mm-hmm. And then he inserts himself into her memories.
Yeah, it's a very strange scene.
I get it now that I know, but watching it, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Because it's, the basic premise of it, and like I said, this is one movie where I could reveal all the plot details that I want and still film that I'm not spoiling anything, exactly. Because once you see it, it's gonna knock you for a loop.
Yeah, it's not gonna play out like you think.
Yeah. No synopsis or plot description is going to get to you what the actual experience of watching this movie is like. But it's because, like the premise says, you get the sense that this demon is in love with LUZ, this Chilean cab driver, and man, she's such a screen presence. The actress that plays LUZ, her name is Luana Velis. Such a powerful presence on screen. She's
really good, yeah. And you could see why this demon was in love with her.
Because she's beautiful, she's kind of rebellious, but she's very dark, and there's something wicked in her soul, where I kind of get the feeling that the demon is hopping from body to body to try to get to her, because it wants to soul bond with her. You realize that if this demon soul bonds with this very evil woman, they're going to create something even darker together. So you could tell, so the demon is in love with her, and you could totally see why, because she's fucking beautiful, and she's kind of magnetizing, but she's a little bit, something about her seems off or scary.
And then, did this happen to you at the end of the movie? I just sat there, I was like, it ended, that just happened. Mm-hmm. And then I sat there, and I didn't know what to think at first, and then all of a sudden it just rushed over me, oh my God.
That's scary. Yeah. And like I said, I don't want to ruin what happens at the end. That's one thing I won't say.
But it's so low-key.
It has a really low-key ending that, like, when it first ends, you're like, oh, okay, that really happened. You're like, oh, shit, that really happened. Yeah. That's not good. Like, it leaves you with that type of feeling, like I said, like, it really delves into the subconscious mind. And it's the type of filmmaking that is extremely, extremely rare. Yeah. Not everybody has that type of talent to pull off that style of filmmaking that enters your brain subconsciously, that level of surrealism. It's one of the reasons I really have to commend this debut filmmaker,
Tillman Singer.
Tillman Singer.
Written and directed.
I want to see more from Tillman Singer. I think this filmmaker has a very unique voice and is doing work that's unlike anything else on the market. It's so unique that even if you don't like it, you have to appreciate or respect what he's doing on some level, because nobody else is making art like this, especially in the horror genre. I felt like it kind of reinvents the possession movie.
Yeah.
And it creates a whole new way to experience a horror movie. It feels wholly new, which is something that is, I don't know how rare that is to discover something that feels completely wholly original and new. There's a lot of great movies, a lot of great horror movies that you love them. They're retreads of something else, but it doesn't matter because it's done so well. The execution is what's important. Here, has originality in spades.
Yeah, and it's a student thesis, so it's a beginner.
And that's what's most baffling about it. There's nothing about this film that has the air of a student film. It has the air of a filmmaker who's very in control of their craft, knows exactly what they're going for. They know the exact vision that they want, the exact aesthetic, the overly deliberate shots that go on too long. Like the opening scene, I like that it puts you in that surreal state of mind, because it's a very static shot that keeps going. Then it goes past the point where you think it should cut away, and then it goes past that point where it starts to feel uncomfortable, and then it goes past that point where you're starting to feel, oh God, what am I in for? It's those deliberate choices and the look of this film. I really like this movie a lot, and I have immense respect for it, and playing it over in my head only enhanced my appreciation for it, because I could see, even while I was frustrated, that this was I'm supposed to be frustrated. I'm supposed to not completely understand it. And I realized that's how nightmares are. You don't completely get them when you're going through them. They don't make sense. It seems inscrutable. But when you think back on the logic of it and start to analyze it, it starts to come together and it starts to make sense.
Yeah.
And I just love the approach, and I'm really, really impressed by this movie. And I can't wait to watch it again, because I feel like my appreciation is going to be elevated with each new viewing.
Yeah, so I'd highly recommend this. It could be perplexing to you, but just give it a chance. It has layers.
Yes. And like I said, watch it with somebody else and discuss it after. It'll put the film in better context. So LUZ 2019, Tillman Singer, one of the most unique, I don't know if it's the best horror film of 2019, but it's certainly the most unique one.
It's definitely going to be up there with the best of the year, I think.
I think so too. And I think more viewings will put it even higher on that list for me.
Yeah, because right after I finished it, I wouldn't have said it was one of my favorites at all of the year.
But talking about it...
Because I was so frustrated by it.
Yeah. But talking about it puts it into a new perspective.
Well, the thing is, when you think about it afterwards, you can't believe that you didn't get that watching it. Yeah. Because it seems so obvious. It was so well presented in front of your face.
You're like, duh.
It just didn't spoon feed it to you.
Yeah, that's another thing. There's no holding hands. This director throws you into the situation. It's uncompromising. He's like, I'm not going to hold your hands. I'm not going to baby you or spoon feed the audience. You're going to see what I want you to see.
Yeah.
And that type of filmmaking is brave. It's very brave, very risky, because when you approach something so high concept, it could just fall completely flat, especially for a debut movie. Yeah. And the fact that it pretty much is flawless in setting out to achieve what it wants to achieve, that it's such a vision that demands respect, I think. If you're into filmmaking as an art form, this, not just horror movies, this film demands some sort of respect.
Yeah, it's one of those rare movies that makes you feel good about the history, about the future of horror.
The different possibilities. And so we've talked about 3 2019 current horror releases, and it just shows you how good horror is doing right now on different levels. You got the big budget mainstream stuff with something like It Chapter 2, a blockbuster horror.
Yeah.
Then you got the indie art house horror if you want something more challenging like LUZ, or if neither of those are your thing and you want that exploitation, hardcore brutality, you got From HELl. And I gotta say, the 2019 horror movies we're discussing, I'm all impressed with all of them on different levels.
And I love that I'm able to see all 3 of those on a big screen. Even though LUZ was very limited release, I love that I got to see all 3 on big screen.
I'm glad the first viewing was on a big screen as well.
Yeah.
Those were our 2019, our latest viewings, and Mike and I are as pleased as punch at the moment.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
So 2019 is shaping up to be a really good year for horror after all. Not just the quality, but the variety of the types of horror, just as displayed by the movies that we just discussed. Apart from 31, which obviously is not from 2019, and it just shows you how different, how horror can adapt to all types of different contexts.
Yeah, and LUZ is technically 2018, you know, how we reported on it last year, but it took this long to get to us where we could view it.
But it wasn't unveiled to the public, I think, until
it was just
this
festival
year.
And stuff.
So that's my rule. If it came out the year to the public, that's the year it came out, because most movies that come out a certain year were shot the year before.
Exactly.
Or were made the year before. So for me, LUZ is 2019.
But I'm on the fence about this next movie we're going to talk about, of whether it's 2019 or not, because it definitely is 2018, but there was a delay in the release because of one of the actresses getting hurt on it. Mm-hmm. But this rides the line for me. I'm just so pissed that I didn't get to see it in 2018.
But I would say this is a 2018 horror movie, and we're talking about Incident in a Ghostland.
Yeah.
And I have to count it as such because I know that it was available for some people to see in 2018.
Yeah.
And that's enough for me to say that's not 2019. It's not being unveiled to the public now.
Yeah.
Having said that, I wish I would have seen it.
Yes.
Last year, because it probably would have cracked my top 10 horror movies of 2018. I was really fucking impressed with this movie.
It would have been very close to the top of my list of best movies of that year. And as much as I love the rest of the movies that we've discussed on this podcast, this is my favorite one that I watched this week.
This one?
Incident in a Ghostland. It just felt so personal to me. It hit so many beats that I personally love about horror films, and personally love about films in general, and the feeling that they give me. And I absolutely loved every frame of it. It's directed and written by Pascal Laugier. He's French Canadian, and he's the director of Martyrs, and that's one of my
both of ours.
Yeah, one of my shameful blind spots. And it stars Mylene Farmer as the mom, and Amelia Jones as Beth. Her sister is Vera, played by Taylor Hickson, and Taylor Hickson is the one that got hurt on set. And when you see the violence in this movie, you will understand why this girl got hurt, because oh my god, dude, the violence was swift and brutal, and it looked like it hurt whether it was fake or not. It looked like it was hurting the stunt people and hurting the actors. That's how intense the action was.
It's kind of a painful horror movie.
Yes. Emotionally and physically.
Yeah, it's kind of a damaging horror movie. That's the way I would describe this. And what makes this interesting to be talking about this after LUZ is I just said that I think LUZ is wholly unprecedented and original. I wouldn't say this is as unprecedented as LUZ in terms of the vision it stakes out. Having said that, this is pretty damn original. I can't recall a horror movie that's quite like this one. The way that the storyline plays out, the way that it goes back and forth between the past and the present, the twist in the movie, which, let's not spoil the twist.
Yeah.
There is a twist. The violence of the movie is brutal and unrelenting and kind of makes your heart pound out of your chest. It's shocking, and it's extremely visceral. It's a movie that gives you a fucking gut punch.
Yeah.
Because you get to see... I say it like you get to see, like it's a privilege. You see children in terror. like in It Chapter 2, you get to see children in terror. But unlike It, these a much more realistic scenario of seeing children in danger. And it's not even murder. It's psychological and physical torture that makes you cringe, that breaks your heart to see it happening. So I think for a lot of people, this might be one of those movies that straddles the line between what's acceptable and what's unacceptable on big screen. So I think this one will push some boundaries out there. But hey, horror is for pushing boundaries. But if you're not the type of person who likes to see children in danger or being hurt, this movie will probably piss you the fuck off or enrage you, as just a trigger warning for anybody out there who might be...
Yeah, and within the first few minutes, like literally the first or second scene, the horror begins and it does not let up to the final fucking frame. Mm-hmm. Holy shit, there was no slow parts in this. Any kind of part that was deliberately slow paced was very
There weren't many though.
Yeah, it was very deliberate. The pacing was breakneck pacing.
And the villains in this movie were horrifying. They didn't really have much personality.
Yeah.
But they're so forceful that they didn't really need it.
Yeah, and some aspects of it seemed vaguely supernatural.
But it wasn't supernatural.
And then I love the revelation that, is it supernatural? And then, holy shit, it's not. And then you come to the point where, oh my god, I wish it was supernatural.
Because it would make the story harder it would make the story easier to swallow by the end. Because by the time you're done, you're like, wow, I feel really drained. So I wouldn't know if enjoyable is the word, but it's definitely a powerful viewing experience. And it definitely falls on the more hardcore side of horror.
Yeah.
Or in a way, relating this back to 3 from Hell, that probably has more depraved violence in it and more shocking and like things that seem outside the realm of rated R. But this, in some ways, the violence hits a little bit harder than that because it's not murder the way that it is. It's the constant torture of young kids that really drives it up. Like the unbelievable psychological damage that that these girls are racking up in their mind is what gives you. It's violent, but it's not gruesome. But it's extremely violent. So it's definitely in the same hardcore realm that 3 from Hell is. But I think 3 from Hell might be easier to swallow for people because it's more of like the brutal violence of murders and it's adults. Seeing these children tortured for an hour and a half is powerful, but a little bit exhausting. By the end, you feel like, oh my God.
And I felt the panic and anxiety of a parent when their child is in danger.
I can only imagine what that would be like for a parent to think that your child would be in such an awful situation.
Yeah, and that scene where the villains first attack.
And we haven't really described the premise, which I think is best that we don't give away the premise for this movie because I think you should see it for yourself and let it play out.
And that first attack was so scary and brutal. And
I jumped.
And you spend very little time with the characters before they're thrown in a horrific situation, but you feel like you know them right away. You feel like you know the family dynamic of the mom and the 2 daughters with the absent father.
There's a very good, because this is a short movie. I'm surprised how much is in it because it's only 90 minutes long.
Yeah.
And there's a certain economy of storytelling that it sets up its points very fast, really quick, and gets to it without it ever feeling like it was rushed or you didn't have time to develop anything or let tension build up. So he did a good job with building up things fast while still making it feel like you are drawn into the suspense of the world. It doesn't come up too quick like that.
Yeah, and I felt that there was that one scene where that first attack, I felt like there was a moment that I will never forget. Every now and then there'll be a moment in movies like this where I know I'm never going to forget how I felt when I seen that, is when the mom comes and saves one of the daughters, and then just after she saves her, she makes eye contact with her. And the moment she makes eye contact with her, the other daughter screams from across the house, and she just runs like a mad dog
to save her children.
Yeah, to the other daughter. So you see the mom run off, and then you stay with the daughter, and you follow the daughter all the way to chase the mom to see what she's doing. And when you walk in, the mom is already just brutally beating on one of the attackers. Mm-hmm. And man, I just got chills describing that.
Yeah, like I said, it's a movie that makes it just really beats itself into your brain. It's very relentless, and it's not going to be for every taste, but it's quite an experience.
For me, it's about as exhilarating as you can get, as depraved as it is, and it's brutal.
It's interesting. It walks just the line that it would have been less exhilarating if it stepped over it a little bit too much. It could have been a couple moments here and there, kind of like in 3 from Hell, where Rob Zombie could have ended up being gratuitous, but he knew when to cut off.
Yeah.
This movie, it pushes it to the edge, but for my taste anyway, it didn't go over the edge. It still seemed justified within the story, but I was on the verge of it going, is this right? And by the end, I was, okay, it worked really, 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 really well. But like I said, for some people, this is going to be a harsh experience.
Yeah, and the design and the look of those villains and the way they were shot, everything about them was just so creepy and wrong. And it reminded me, do you remember Surveillance? Is Jennifer Lynch is a movie with Bill Pullman in it.
I've never seen that, but I am familiar with other Jennifer Lynch movies, and they have all. For those of you who don't know, Jennifer Lynch is the daughter of David Lynch,
Yeah.
the surrealist filmmaker. She's nothing like her dad. I'd never even put her in the same category. She's fucking hardcore.
But
Chained.
That movie has a similar level of dread that this one does.
You know what? I could see this being a Jennifer Lynch movie.
Yeah.
Like, if I didn't know who did it and you told me after it was Jennifer Lynch, I'd be like, oh, yeah, that seems like her type of material. So if you like Jennifer Lynch, this is probably really up your alley.
Yeah. And I love the set. It was mostly filmed in this big old house that because the mom and the two daughters, like the mom inherits this old house, so they go and move in it, and then the violence starts pretty much right away. But the house is decorated like it's really old and vintage, and looks very authentically old and vintage.
I think it's one of the best things about the movie is the house that most of it takes place in. It's a triumph of production design. Like,
Yeah.
it's a very well thought out, and since most of the movie takes place in the house and it's a pretty big place, it has just the right level of eeriness, the right level of an antique quality.
Yeah, like-
it seems
like
strange and foreign.
There's all different sizes of dolls everywhere.
Some of them really fucking creepy dolls.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like a set designer went in there and tried to make it look creepy.
It just looks like you discovered a house that's unlike anything you've ever seen before or anything you've ever been inside.
Yeah, it seems
such a
just
unique movie, unique look to that movie.
like people had lived there who had accumulated these things over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see that, I won't explain why, but that's why it's such an attractive place for these killers to kind of
Convene.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like it's a place that would draw in a certain type of darkness or depravity. Makes sense that depravity would be let loose in these settings.
And then the villains pulling up in an ice cream truck.
That's so fucking...
Kinda
That was one of the
weird
creepy things. You know what's also interesting about the house as you describe it? It's a type of setting that would be perfect for a supernatural horror film.
Yeah,
But it's not. And that's what makes it as interesting is like for these types of more brutal horror films, you don't usually make that type of production design. That's not really what works for relentless brutality. And that's what gives this film, I guess, another unique look. Is that this? And I think that's another reason why you think that something supernatural could happen at any time, because the settings are so strange and foreign that they feel like something supernatural has to come out of this, but it never does. And I think that makes it more effective because you're hoping it's something fantasy. You're hoping it's not this real, so you could have some sort of escape. And I feel like that haunted house looking setting kind of teases you where it's just out of reach, and it makes the story hit a lot harder when you realize, no, it's all real. It's all reality.
Yeah, and as it approaches that twist, that's when it starts feeling more increasingly like, this is supernatural. What the hell is going on? What is that? It's kind of disembodied voice here and there, and there's some things that we can't talk about without giving it away.
And we won't give it away because you really deserve to experience it for the first time fresh.
Yeah, but as it approaches that twist, you kind of start thinking it's supernatural, but then when you find out it's not within the devastating effect of that twist,
all
absolutely
the performances are really good because it's a type of movie that would be grueling for an actor to go through just because what they require of these young actors is asking a lot.
Yeah.
Of these young actors to perform in such a way. And like you said, one of them got injured on the set. And that's very, very unfortunate. And it's only stain I would think this movie has on it. And it's probably why it's not as seen is just the director handled some of the violence on set irresponsibly with the young girl who is now disfigured. But it's believable because it's so relentless.
Yeah.
And it does bring to questions like, did you have to do that? Or couldn't you have found a safer way? Just personally, as you know, like Mike and I, we have our own show. Safety is very important, and it's very important to make that sure that your actors. I would never feel comfortable putting any actor in a situation where it's quite possible that they could disfigure themselves or something like that. So I think that's too bad that it happens. Regardless, it is a very good horror movie.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that's going to have to do with why its release wasn't so advertised and why people in the horror community weren't talking about it more, because Martyrs is such a big thing in horror that you would think this new filmmaker's film would make more of an impact, but there's just too much controversy surrounding the actual production of it.
Yeah. Well, director wanted the actress to bang on a piece of glass, like a window. Mm-hmm. And as far as I know, by all intents and purposes, that wasn't gonna break. Like, it was a big, thick piece of glass. I think the director was absolutely sure that wasn't gonna break, so he had her pounding on it pretty hard.
But she was questioning it, and she wasn't sure if it was a good idea.
Yeah.
And so, just anybody out there who makes films, just make sure that you take care of your actors, because you don't want that kind of blemish. You don't want that kind of blemish on your filmmaking career. Yeah. And not just some type of blemish. You don't want that as a person. You don't want to hurt anybody.
Yeah, because this taints an otherwise perfect film for me, that this happened. One of the most effective scenes and one of the scariest scenes, and just everything about it was so awesome. You remember when the two sisters were huddled together and they had managed to lock the door, and one of the villains was on the other side? There's a skinny villain and a fat villain, and it was a skinny one, and it was this androgynous voice you hear on the other side of the door, and just goes, "We broke your sister. Now it's your turn." That just made my skin crawl. I just got chills again.
Just thinking about it. Really quick, the young actress who got her was Taylor Hickson. She's really good in the movie, though. And it's just a minor disfigurement what happened to her. I would like to see her in more movies, because I think she was really good, and it shows that she's capable of performing under very difficult circumstances.
And when I was watching some of those violent scenes, I was like, how did she not get hurt before that glass hit her? My God, the impact.
Yeah, so it's very unsparing, and it's a low-budget movie. There's no CGI, so most of these effects were achieved practically, and that always makes things a little bit more dangerous.
Yeah, and I really want violence like this in my movies, because I really want you to feel it like that, but I don't know.
Not at the risk of the actors.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that throws this movie into a tizzy or a question. The only thing that kind of gives me a little bit of a quandary as regarding my feelings towards it.
Yeah.
But it is a very good horror movie, and it's very, very worth checking out. And as much as I hate what happened, and I think it's really unfortunate, it doesn't take away from the quality of the movie at all.
Yeah, and after watching this, I'm even more excited to watch Martyrs, but I'm also a little scared. Because this director, he makes you expect the worst from the beginning, and then you feel this profound sense of relief along with the victims when it's over, what victims are left.
Yeah.
So just wow. I absolutely loved it. Can't wait to watch Martyrs. And I know I should be strung up in a tree for not watching Martyrs yet.
I'll slice your fingers off.
But I really should have watched it by now.
We both should have watched it, but you know what? It's every fan of movies, horror movies, there's always big blind spots.
Yeah.
It's hard to see everything. You see as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I'm sure even the biggest horror expert, there's blind spots that they have, or things that they've never seen that you would think would be a little bit more obvious.
So once one of us gets our hands on it, we'll both watch it and we'll discuss it here. But from what I hear, it's even better than Incident in Ghostland.
So we're almost done with the podcast, but before we go, we just wanted to give you a little update on where we're at right now.
Yeah, it has been completely insane. Just lately, not just yesterday. Yesterday we filmed
The Green
most
Man.
of the evening. And we filmed another one written and directed by you called The Green Man.
Yes, it's a little short that I wrote and directed, and it's kind of my tribute to A Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, it's going to be hilarious and strange. And
I really tried to make this one very odd and dreamlike, and from what I saw of the footage, I'm pretty happy with it, but we'll see when we get in the editing room how this turns out.
Yeah, and then this coming weekend, we're going to be helping Gargoyle Media make one of their shorts called The Purge. And then after that, we got another Gargoyle Media short that we're going to film. And after that, there'll be 2 films in a row that I'm writing and directing. So we have a lot of cool stuff coming up in season 2 of Pickle's Horror Show. And also we're working on Pay Up.
Which is Michael's feature film debut.
Yeah, and as far as I know, the sound designer is pretty much done with the score. She has some more tweaking to do on it, and she's done with a lot of the sound effects and stuff. So we just sent her all the numbers of the audio files, so now she's fixing all the dialogue. It's very near completion.
We'll keep you updated on Pay Up. And also, watch our variety show. It comes out every Friday night on American Horrors, the Roku channel. It's our horror variety show. We have, like our regular followers know, we have short films, skits, event coverage, highlights from this very podcast that you're listening to now. We do it all. We try to have a lot of fun. We put a lot of work into it. So just check it out.
And all new episodes are playing right now. Season 2 just started last week.
Oh, with our season premiere?
Yeah.
Every Friday night around 6:30 Pacific.
Yeah.
And 8:30 Central. So just keep in mind, since it runs very loosely, it could happen anytime between 6:30 and 6:40 or 7. So within 20-30 minutes, it usually comes on. It's a very loose schedule. So 6:30ish every Friday night Central. However, that translates to the rest of the world because it's broadcast worldwide.
Yeah.
So depending on where you're at, it's going to be airing at different times. So just translate that and you'll get the right show time.
And there's really usually a really cool exploitation film playing
before
at the time our show is supposed to be on, so just stick around and watch that movie. You won't be disappointed. You'll have a good time with it, and then right after that movie will be our show.
Yes, horror show every Friday night, American Horrors. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Until next week, join us on Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
Don't forget to check out the page at Pickles Horror Show on Instagram and Facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. Happy horror, everyone.
Happy horror.